Alright, so in this next stage of the file, and this is really how I work my renderings personally. It always takes small incremental steps, and I usually end up doing a test render and not liking it, changing something, and 15 test renders later I'm kind of happy with it. It is something that really takes a lot of time, but as we go through these things, I hope that you understand a little bit more of how to control some of the finesse of getting things the right size and scale, that they appear more real and help you explain what it is you're trying to depict in the image. So if we look at the last frame of this last render, I mean, one of the huge problems here is that the floor of the building is just white. Mies van der Rohe designed this building to have a travertine floor, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So we're going to work on putting that in for this top piece of the pavilion. To do that, we have to make a custom material. So if I right click, load material, and say standard, I'm going to rename it to T stone. Make it easy. And you know, as a basic material, it's flat gray. But just like before, we don't want to use the diffuse color. I could change it, now it's red. This isn't what we want. We want something with a lot more characteristics and textures and nuances. So we're going to build it up. And to do that, we're going to import a JPEG as a map. So here I have a list of different type of maps that can be used, and I'm just going to use a bitmap. A bitmap will work with a bitmap or a JPEG. And then I have to come in and find the files. If you've downloaded the zip file from my website, which includes the pavilion model and these textures, just go in and look. Let's see, where are we at? Here we go. I downloaded these from a website, which I'll link in the description, and it has a lot of the stone for the walls and also the travertine floor. So this is the diffuse map, and then we have a bump map. So with the diffuse map, I'm going to pull in, and we can see it's kind of a tannish, stone floor, like we'd expect. And now when I preview this material, it's no longer red. We're using this map. The next thing we want to do is to put the bump map part of it. The stone is not perfectly smooth and flat. It has some flakes to it. It has some ups and downs. So to do that, I'm going to come down and right-click under Maps, the bump map, and I have to supply it, just like before, a bitmap. So this was my diffuse, and this is my bump. Let's see if I can zoom in here. There we go. You can see that here's the color of the material, but this is really just the black and white. Bump maps only look at black, white, and shades of gray, and that determines how far a thing bumps up or bumps down. So I'll open up this one, we'll preview it. It's the exact same size as the other file, which is really important so that all the bumps line up where they're supposed to be. And now if I preview this, let's see. You can barely see, you probably can't see anything. It has a little bit more grain to it. If I really increase the size of the bump to 10, let's see if we can get something crazy. Yeah, the stone looks very gnarled. I know I don't want that. I want something very minimal, so I'm going to go 0.1. It's just a small amount of difference. And then with this top piece selected, I'm going to right-click and apply to selection. Here comes a good time to take a look at the rendered view in Rhino. So if I bring up my quick toolbar by middle clicking on my mouse, I can go to the rendered previewed mode. And I can see that the stone has been applied to the top of the surface. I can also see that these are really, really large pieces of stone. And one of the interesting things about the pavilion is that there's a very fine grid of stone, and it runs through all of the windows and all of the columns. It keeps everything very nice and organized. Also, it's much more realistic because we can't buy large sheets of stone, at least this size. So we need to do something to scale this down, to map the material in some way to be the right dimension. To do that, you have to do texture mapping. And just like before when we edited the light, we do have options under properties that we can drill down into. So here I'm going to come to texture mapping. In Rhino 4, it's again the drop-down menu. And I'm going to apply several different things here. We'll cover them little by little, but for this one, we just want a planar map. Here is a surface. You can see it has a little bit of a wave, and what that'll do is it'll use the surface as a min and max. It'll have 0 on one side. It will call this point 0, 0, and this one 0, 1, and this one 1, 0, and this one 1, 1. And it will stretch everything to meet that. We want to have more control of that. If this surface was wavy, surface mapping might work well because it would actually map the material up and down the wave. For this, it's just a flat surface, and we can use planar mapping. So by clicking planar mapping, I bring up a heading here, and it asks me a few questions. What do I want to do with my planar mapping? I'm just going to use bounding box off the world, and it's done. It looks exactly the same, and that's because I now have a series of options here to come in and edit. So I could say, all right, well, what size is this XY axis? And right now it's set to 2200. If I drop that down to say 200, you can see I have a lot more repetitions in the X dimension. This is set at 900. If I drop that down to 200, now I have a lot more in the Y. What's also important to note is that you have a grid, a 200 by 200 grid, which is what we're looking for. The size of this maybe isn't exactly dead on. You know, I could definitely sit in here and say, all right, well, I've got some blueprints and I know that Mies designed each one of these to be 3 meters. Well, there's a 3-meter line, and now I can't see the line while I'm in rendered view, but I have an idea that it's about double what it needs to be. So if I drop this down to 100, sorry, I think we have to go the other way. Let's go up to 400 by 400. I have larger pieces of stone now. And that's closer, at least in my mind, to what is actually on the scene. The Barcelona Pavilion doesn't only have travertine for the floor, but also this wall. Actually, these 2 walls. So let's apply that same material to this back wall here. And it's also got for the bench and these guys down here, the supports. Let's put it on this wall. So again, opening materials, I'm just going to right click the stone and apply to selection. You can see now I have this long grainy wall, and I know for a fact it actually matches the exact same dimensions of the floor. So unlike before, I don't want planar mapping. A plane would be, either just in the XY or the YZ or the YX. I want something a little more dynamic than that. I want something that's going to cover all 6 sides of this wall, the top, bottom, left, right, front, and back. And to do that, I can use box mapping. So with box mapping selected, again, it asks me, what do I want to do? I say bounding box off the world. Do I want to cap it? Yes, I want the top and bottom closed. So now, again, the material looks just the same, but I have an opportunity here to come in and try to scale this to match exactly what the floor is. So here it's at 800, and it's at 800 because the total length of this wall matches that. I'm going to drop this down to say 400, and we'll do this one 400. And although the X position looks right, the Y is definitely not. So we're going to have to change this maybe to 40. There we go. It's going to be the Z that controls the number. Let's go 1. Too many, so 400. There we have large grids. If everything is 400, it should all match. We see one issue is the seam is here, and on the floor the seam is here. So we're a little off, and we can reposition that by adjusting the X position here. You can see it's moving little by little. I'm just going to try to get those lined up as best as possible. There. It's pretty close. So this seam runs all the way down onto the floor, and that's an important part of the pavilion. When I take this second wall that wraps all the way around, I'm again going to go to materials, right click and apply the material. And what's nice is I can match it. This is using a bounding box with 400, 400, 400. I'm just going to right click on this guy, say I want a bounding box, say yes, bounding the world, cap it yes, and then Rhino 5 gives me the ability to match properties. So I'm going to match my mapping to this existing one, and now you can see I have everything just as I did before, and it lines up. So that was a pretty easy way to get all of the textures in. I'm going to do it the same way to the stairs. Again, materials, right click, apply to selection. I'm going to do a box mapping, bounding box, world, cap. Then I say match this guy. And then lastly, I'm going to do the benches. To do the bench, I'm just going to right click and select all my objects here so I don't have to pick them one by one. Materials, select, apply to selection, box map, bounding box, world, cap yes, and then match this guy here. So now everything is kind of the same material, in the same proportion, the same ratio. So if I come back to my view, which is view number 1, I'm actually going to pull back a little bit so we get to see that nice stone that we spent so much time putting in. We'll do a quick render, and we'll be off to the next tutorial. Alright, so there it is. We're moving forward with it. I know I have a very, very bright spot here that I'm not happy with, but in the next series of tutorials we're going to apply the stone wall inside, much like we did the stone here. We'll put in water and the stone base for the troughs, which hold all the reflecting pools. And then we're going to move into more accurate lighting. We have the ability to bring in HDRIs and reflections maps that will bring a whole new dimension to the project. So that'll be coming up next, followed by, or first, the mapping of the stone walls.